Okay. And then we'll take a look at it at week 7 and just do a quick thing. So any questions, instructor feedback, assignment issues?
Nope.
No, not so far.
Okay. My feedback, I'm seeing good collaboration. I really enjoyed the presentations this during week 6. Those were awesome. And I'm seeing more and more sources being used, and that's always a good thing. And the feedback is good to each other. So everybody's got the hang of it. The other question I did have is everybody is so on time. And I was realizing that one of my peers put in a bunch of stuff about if it isn't done by this day, it's not gonna get graded. So was there just scary stuff in the class that that made it look like you had to get everything in that minute?
I think, like I said, with this group, with Derek and I have been the full 2 years, and, Tanisha and all of us together, the whole time, we've always been everyone's been pretty routine. Yeah, I mean, you can tell who's going to have what done first and who's going to be kind of middle of the pack and come in at the end, but everybody's on time.
Good deal. Good. Good. We never want it to be a fear factor. Okay, so this week we've got integration, which is all 4 processes. And that's something that I've just seen people do, create the project charter and the project plan, and then just not do the rest of them. And I'm not sure why, but just to let you know, it's all of the 4.x processes. So right through project closing. And then executive summary, which we're going to talk about, and the reflection was from last week. So, integration management, the one thing that I wanted to say about that is that if you just went through and you talked about all your tools and techniques and so on, it would be it could be very dry and not very meaningful. But if you explain how you, as a project manager, acted as an integrator between the different groups and between the organization and the project, and if you explain how changes to one knowledge area meant that you had to make sure that they went across to all the other knowledge areas, that's kind of more what we're looking for in integration, because you're really looking across all of the knowledge areas with integration. Questions?
No.
Any examples that you can think of offhand about some kind of integration that you did?
I guess the biggest thing with us, as far as my project goes, is the control process that we use. As far as, I mean, what's key with us was, staying on track with the assembly and the regulatory aspect of it to make sure that we had everybody, licensed and all that kind of stuff. Because a lot of our stuff was pretty cookie cutter.
Okay. Oh, cool.
But the regulatory aspect is always something that we have to plan and try to integrate in case anything happens or gets derailed. Not so much with the existing jurisdictions, but like for this one example that I've been writing my paper on, is it was a brand new jurisdiction. So that was something that we always had to keep on the risk factor and that kind of stuff, because they were changing the rules every other day.
And that's exactly a kind of an integration thing, because when you integrate, you're really looking at the environment that you're in as a project and how you have to keep adjusting to keep up with that environment. So that's a good
Yeah,
example.
because like for example, I mean, when we first started and we were on site, the building was raw, but yet we were still doing all our pre-wiring and stuff. And they said as long as you had a gaming number application with the state, you were allowed to work on site. And then a couple days later, they came and they said, okay, if you don't actually have a badge, but you have an application in, you can shoulder surf, but you can't touch a system.
Hmm.
Then a few days later, they came back and they said, well, if you don't have a badge, you can't be on site at all. So we ended up working out in the horse paddocks because that technically wasn't property, but yet it still had a network connection. So it was like, we didn't know what they were going to come up with almost every other day. It was like, all right, whatever. We'll see how today rolls.
Yeah.
So it was weird.
And then making all the adjustments in the plan too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, all right, you 6 can work off site in the horse paddock. You 4 can't even be here. You know, it's crazy.
Okay. All right. Well, the next thing is executive summary. And we used to say executive summary or abstract, but abstract has all sorts of word limits and funky formatting, and we are not writing an abstract. So don't do that. It is an executive summary. And the one thing that I would say is that if you're trying to keep it down to a page and you do sequential order, you're not going to get to the important stuff because it's always so tempting to really explain that problem in depth. And the problem is really not a big deal for the executive summary. How the problem was solved is a big deal, but not what the problem was before you solved it. So, so accomplishments are big, but problems are just not that big. And you don't have to start, well, first we had a problem and then we had a charter and then it just doesn't work. So focus a lot on what that team accomplished by completing the project. And I actually had one in here that we could go through, but I didn't send it out to you. So I don't think we'll go through it. But I think that you'll be able to read each other's executive summaries and give each other feedback, and you'll really learn a lot about it that way. I really like the way that this one starts. They successfully migrated everybody from Lotus Notes to Outlook. Do you even remember Lotus Notes?
Yep, I do.
I don't know what that is.
I just dated myself as well.
Me too. I can't believe somebody was still using it as their main Excel and Word and email. So that's really interesting, but it was a government thing. Or
Well, that explains
actually,
why.
yeah.
They probably still had 8.5-inch floppies too.
And 7 unsuccessful attempts to complete the migration. So it was interesting, but I thought that that particular one, that it does talk about the problem, but it really, actually, she starts out talking about the solution, but then kind of wanders off into more problem. And another thing that when we were looking at this last time, people said, well, do the executives need to know that technical activities were handled by this group and included all pre-migration activities? Is there a reason why that sentence needs to be in an executive summary? And I think it's not so important that it's that particular sentence, but it's important to look at each sentence and say, is this really, if I have only 15 to 20 sentences that I can fit into an executive summary. Is this sentence really one of those 15? And to look at every sentence with that in mind. And then going into actual costs and so on. Super. That's the kind of thing that executives look at. And then this got into a lot of the detail. And I think that because we as project managers are immersed in the detail, as we tend to think that it's important to really explain it. And I'm not so sure on an executive summary. I think shorter is better, and higher level is even more important. So, so those were things that we learned looking at somebody else's. Any other questions about the executive summary?
Nothing for me.
Okay.
Me either.
So I put something else up here called a shared reference page, and there's a link to it in the week 7. And you know how I've really changed my mind about APA style as we've gone through, as I've gone through and taught this course especially. I think one of the biggest complaints that I've ever heard from students about writing is that all the teacher seems to be grading on is APA. And they're not. They're grading on critical thinking, which is how well did you pull together information from credible sources and use that to support what you were doing. And that's not APA. But this whole business of capitalization and italics on the reference page, I'm just not convinced that that's a really critical thing, that if you don't learn that by the end of the semester, you're in big trouble. And so you may have noticed that I just correct your stuff and I say, don't use the old stuff, use the new stuff, and we're good to go. So I did put out a bunch of corrected references. And I think the other thing that it's helpful for is that some people took longer to really get in the swing of this. And so now they're going back and they're really trying to find some good references. And just having a look at what your classmates from a previous class used as references can sometimes just get you tuned into some really superb references, some sources that you might want to use. So I hope you'll take a look at it. So, and if you want to put anything on there and have it corrected, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Any questions about that? It's a big, long list. MS Project, and the other thing that I would say about that is that not all sources are created equal. And I didn't go through and say, well, you know, this is some guy trying to sell consulting. And so this is really kind of a poor source. I didn't do any evaluation. So there's good sources and not so good sources in there. MS Project Workshop. If you'd like to work on weekly workshop, I'll continue to provide feedback. I can give you as soon as you turn in what you think, as soon as you just send me or put it in week 4, what you think is your final thing, I'll just finish up the grading, give you that, and then you can choose to update it or not and submit it in week 8.
Okay.
So have you started working on your week 8 final paper?
I did this actually today. I started piecing together the attached, information you gave me on my previous papers.
Uh-huh.
Just started updating it and just waiting. I have to add week 6 now, and then of course week 7, which is this week, and then that's it.
You're a lot further than I am.
Yep.
I got what I did for, I took all my graded papers from previous weeks. I
Mhm.
emailed them to myself so that way I can have them on my iPad while I piece everything together so I can go through and make the updates.
Yep.
That sounds good. A couple things that people said in the last class. They found that starting in week 1 was not a good idea, because they would look back at what they wrote in week 1 and say, oh my God, what was I thinking? Why would I write that? Because their writing has changed so much over the weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, take your week 6 stuff when you get the grades, or your week 5 stuff, and pop that into the right place in the paper, and then edit and revise that, and then work backwards to week 1, because that will give you, you'll have a lot less revision to do on your later weeks than you did on your first or second week. APA formatting page, you're just going to be pulling everything together onto one reference page. I'd be happy to take a look at anything that you have questions about on that. And there were earlier papers when people would, for example, have a direct quote, but they didn't have it designated as a direct quote. I mean, I've read the PMBOK guide or people citing the PMBOK guide so many hundreds of times that I can tell you the wording on a lot of different quotes. And I can kind of tell when it is a direct quote. And generally, I just go back and say, this looks like a direct quote. Be more careful about paraphrasing. And if it is, if you have 5 or more words in a row that are the same order and the same words in some kind of a source, that's a direct quote. And you need double quotes around the words that are that sequence, and you need a page number. And if there is no page number, then you just put N period, P period for no page. So you don't just leave it blank. And then, with paraphrasing, the other thing is that just, even though you think I'm really overdoing putting in PMI 2017, it's hard to overdo it. Because if you say, I use these 3 tools and techniques for this particular process, I think, well, did you come up with those all on your own? What a coincidence that they're exactly 3 of the tools that PMI calls out. And so it's just easier for you to just pop in PMI 2017 as an in-text citation, so that we all know that you really are aligned with the PMBOK guide. So, any other questions about the final paper?
No questions.
The other thing is that it's due on Friday, as opposed to being due on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am not fussy about that. The reason that it has been due on a Friday is because they used to have like 18 to 20 people in this class for some reason. And there was just no, I only have 10 days to deal with it. And there was, that was not possible to get all the grades in and make all the graduation deadlines and do it for, 1,800 and some page papers. So if you can't do Friday, you can't do Friday. It's okay. But if you're going to be later than a Sunday or Monday, that's when you should probably send me an email. And if for some reason I would get ready to turn in grades and yours still isn't in, one of your final assignments is not in, then I'll just probably contact you and say, do you have an ETA? Because I'm ready to turn in other people's grades. And I won't hold up the entire class grades for one person. I'll just ask that person if they'd like to take an incomplete. And I don't think that's going to be an issue this time, but that's the way I handle it, just so you know. So, I don't have anything else. How about you guys?
I don't have anything. I'm just wondering what they're gonna do about the graduation. That's just my only concern now.
I know. Well, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be in person. We have our faculty seminar every year, and there are like 100 different faculty members. We have 700 faculty members at St. Mary's. And there are probably 150 of us who consistently go to the annual faculty training. And they're going to do the whole thing on Zoom this year. So I don't.
Commencement?
Well,
Oh, you mean the faculty meeting?
The faculty meeting.
And when's that usually held?
The faculty meeting?
Yeah.
It's next weekend.
Okay. Because I saw a letter from the chancellor or whatever that said all activities on campus and everything for all campuses were canceled up until the end of May. So our graduation was technically that following Saturday, June 6th. So it's like, okay, what's a difference a week is going to make? So I'm probably thinking it's going to be canceled.
It is so hard to tell right now, isn't it?
No.
Nobody's got any data to go on to predict something like that. So, yeah. I would not make any non-refundable airplane reservations. And you guys, this is interesting because you paid a graduation fee for this class that included a cap and gown, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was, what was it, Derek? 190, right?
$190.
Yep.
And a lot of that was not for the cap and gown. It was more for, a lot of that was more for the whole ceremony and the whole processing that they do and whatever all the administrative stuff is that happens. So I don't know. I do know that they refunded room and board to the on-campus students from the undergrad program. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I feel bad for like all the seniors from high schools and stuff like that. All the stuff they missed out on,
Yep.
Yeah.
proms and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's stuff you're never going to be able to get back,
That's for sure. Yeah. It really.
If, down in Georgia, if they're doing it up here, they did Friday night lights. So all the local high school stadiums turned on their lights in support of the senior athletes.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I will be sad if you guys miss your graduation. It would not surprise me if Bill doesn't do some kind of a Zoom graduation just for our group. I think that there are 2 classes online and 1 class face-to-face graduating. And so I would say it's probably close to 20 some students, 24 or even higher, like 27. So I'll be talking to Bill in the next couple days, Bill Johnson. So I'll ask him that question, and I'll put something on the announcement board.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So I can know if I gotta cancel my hotel or not.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah. Okay, well, I hope that because it's not until June 6th, that's going to be a go. But I'm sure that it's not a known at this point. So,
Yeah, it's a week by week thing.
yeah, it is. And it's things could go south tomorrow. The community that I live in is a 55 plus town, and we had 2 nursing homes that have like 25 cases each. So it just really threw the numbers for our town, because employees and residents both got it. So it's just, every town's got weird stuff like that going on. So we just don't know.
It's crazy.
Yep. All right. Well, keep your families safe and keep yourselves safe. And
I say, and if we do end up not having graduation, Derek, you and I got to figure out a way to meet halfway and at least have lunch.
That's what we, Tanisha and Annie, we talked about that today. We need to just get together, because no, they're down here in Georgia too. So
All right, well, I'll drive down and meet you guys.
there you go. Come on down to Georgia.
That's great.
That works.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here, and have a good week.
All right, you all too.
Yeah.
Thanks. Have a good one.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.